FA Cup, the most famous knockout tournament dating back to 1871. Throughout its history, the FA Cup has provided us with memories of skill, joy, euphoria and upset. Let us guide you through 50 of the most memorable golden moments of the world's most exciting competition, starting over 75 years ago.
In 1923, over 250,000 people clamoured to get inside the Empire Stadium, Wembley, to see its debut as the new home of English football. With only 100,000 expected, the authorities were totally unprepared for the largest crowd ever witnessed for a cup tie. Remarkably, a solitary, police-mounted white horse managed to disperse the masses to allow the FA Cup final to go ahead. The game itself was a comfortable one for the favourites Bolton against a stubborn second division West Ham side, and despite a pitch covered in debris, they won 2-0. And for David Jack, who scored in every round of the FA Cup that year, the last laugh was his. It is 1927, and members of the Football Association inspect a Wembley pitch that would see history made. Cardiff City met Arsenal, having lost in the final 2 years earlier, but this time they would become the only team to win the cup and take it out of England and into Wales. The only goal of the game was scored by Hughie Ferguson after a mistake from, ironically, a Welshman, Reg Lewis. Thousands turned out on the streets of Cardiff to salute the returning heroes and savour the moment of prizing away the most coveted trophy of all. Captain Fred Keenor led the celebrations to match a feat that may never be repeated. Jackie Milburn, affectionately known as War Jackie, was the archetypal forward of his generation. In the final of 1951, Milburn emerged as a match winner against Blackpool, scoring twice, the first of which capped a sweeping Newcastle move deep from within their own half. Composure in front of goal, not a problem for the North East's hero. The second sealed the match and nearly burst the net. Stanley Matthews, the most talented winger of his generation, had twice seen his dream of winning the FA Cup fall at the final hurdle. In 1953, with Blackpool trailing 3-1 against Bolton, his wizardry helped turn the game on its head to produce a thrilling 4-3 victory for the Seasiders. After setting up Stan Mortensen to cut Bolton's lead, he went on to create the winner for Bill Perry. At the final whistle, his teammates rushed to congratulate him. And making the famous trip up the Wembley steps, the adulation was his. Receiving his medal from the Queen, the relief was evident on the face of a man who, at the age of 38, had finally got his hands on a winner's medal. Stan Mortensen scored a hat-trick for Blackpool that day, but this will always be remembered as the Matthews final. They said the double would never be done in the 20th century, that the demands of the modern game made it impossible. But after this sharply taken Bobby Smith goal, Tottenham Hotspur were poised to prove they were good enough to add the FA Cup to the League Championship. Leicester battled bravely through the cup final carrying an injured player, but Spurs' class eventually came through. Smith crossing for Terry Dyson to head past Gordon Banks to clinch a place in the record books. The final whistle was a landmark for English football. It established Tottenham Hotspur as the side of their era. Leading 2-0 against Everton, Sheffield Wednesday must have thought the cup was theirs in the final of 1966. Then came the comeback. Mike Trebleco lashing the ball in with half an hour to go to shake the Blues into life. And the man whose name wasn't even in the match programme produced a second to tip the momentum in Everton's favour. It certainly got the crowd excited, but not even this intervention distracted the Merseysiders from finishing the job off. Derek Temple capitalising on a defensive slip to run in on goal and complete a remarkable turnaround. No team has come back from 2 goals down to win in a cup final since Everton. In 1970, a single goal by Barry Endine was enough to beat Liverpool in the quarter-final at Vicarage Road and send Watford through to the semi-finals for the first time. Watford's manager, Ken Furphy, had seen his team win the 3rd division the season before and hold Manchester United at Old Trafford. But now, Watford had their greatest scout. Liverpool, who would so often end up with silverware in the years to come, had to accept that it was their turn to be the victim of a giant killing. Leeds United had established themselves as one of the elite in the early 70s, but in the 5th round in 1971, they were simply stunned. 4th Division Colchester United played the match of their lives to incredibly lead 3-0. Ray Crawford had opened the scoring before adding another after a sweeping counter-attack, with Leeds' notorious defence all over the place. Colchester's direct approach rattled the Yorkshiremen all afternoon, and when David Simmons made it 3, delirium set in at Layer Road. Leeds did pull it back to 3-2. Wasn't enough. The final of 1971 was poised at 1-1 in extra time as the sweltering heat at Wembley took its toll on all the players. When 20-year-old Charlie George collected the ball and rifled past Ray Clements, Arsenal were within touching distance of the double. Had clinched the championship on the previous Monday at Tottenham, and now they could emulate the achievement of their great local rivals 10 years earlier. Having been behind, the resolve that has served Arsenal so well over the years saw them through yet again. When people talk of the romance of the FA Cup, there's one goal that always springs to mind. In 1972, First Division Newcastle travelled to non-league Hereford, and no one could have forecast what would happen. Ronnie Radford's rocket ignited scenes of pandemonium as he wrote himself into FA Cup folklore, creating one of the biggest upsets in the history of the game. After going behind, Hereford went on to win 2-1 to send the Geordies crashing out of the FA Cup. In the second half of the 1973 final, favourites leads threw everything at the underdog Sunderland. In preserving their 1-0 lead, Sunderland's Jim Montgomery produced a wondrous double save to deny a certain goal from Peter Lorre. Ian Porterfield had given Sunderland the first half lead, and the men from Roker Park, who started the season struggling in the second division, ended up with the cup. Arguably one of the most clinical of partnerships in the 1970s, Liverpool's Kevin Keegan and John Toshack. In the 1974 semi-final replay against Leicester, they produced a masterpiece, helping Keegan's reputation grow in English football, as well as providing a classic example of finishing. Liverpool would go on to win the cup against Newcastle, and Keegan, of course, would go on to far greater achievements. For now, though, he was simply king of the cup. Newcastle United have always loved their number 9s, and in the mid-70s they had Malcolm MacDonald. He fitted the mould perfectly. At Bolton in the 6th round of 1976, he demonstrated the art of goal scoring in two different but devastating ways. First, a cool head, and the second, an absolute blockbuster. The match ended 3-3, but the name on everyone's lips was Super Mac. When Southampton walked out for the 1976 FA Cup final with Manchester United, few people gave the second division side much hope against their more illustrious opponents. But as the game entered its final phase, United's chances had been and gone. With extra time looming, Bobby Stokes latched on to Jim McCalliod's pass to leave the bookmakers eating their words. The cup was on its way to the South Coast. It proved to be a triumph for a rising manager called Lawrie McMenemy. He went on to establish Southampton as a top-flight side, and he handed them the first trophy in their history. The FA Cup isn't always about winning. Bravery in defeat can be just as heroic. When this Brian Talbot goal hit the net in the 1978 semi-final, both he and West Bromwich Albion's John Wyle suffered severe cuts to the head. Talbot had to leave the match, but Wyle's desire to battle on with a Wembley final to play for shows the importance and inspiration that captivates professional footballers. Not every story has a happy ending, though, and John Walk's goal sealed a 3-1 win for Ipswich as fate swung in their direction. There's an old adage in football that it only takes a second to score a goal, and it was never better illustrated than during the climax to the 1979 final. With 4 minutes left, Gordon McQueen reduced Arsenal's lead over Manchester United to 2-1. Then Sammy McIlroy jinked his way through the Arsenal defence, much to the relief of the Old Trafford faithful. With the match seemingly rescued, there was to be another twist. as Arsenal immediately broke down the other end. Graham Ritz's cross was converted by Alan Sunderland to win what's remembered as the 5-minute cup final.